Hey there, my name is Rudy Watkins. We are at Community Beer Works today down in Buffalo, New York. We're going to do a little talking about IPAs, which is one of our favorite styles of beer to brew here. A little bit about Community Beer Works first. We are coming up on 4 years old. We opened in April of 2012. We are right by the Peace Bridge at Lafayette and Niagara. There's a whole crew of us here, so you should stop on in and say hi. We do a lot of hoppy stuff here in Buffalo. We've got on our board back here, we've got 4 or 5 different hoppy beers. We've got our flagship Pale Ale Frank, which is a really nice Pilsner malt base, and then some kind of older school American IPA hops, a bunch of Centennial going on in there. We have our That IPA, which is our standard year-round IPA. It's kind of borderline session, it's 5%, uses a whole bunch of Mosaic and Zethos. And then right now, kind of seasonally in and out, we have our double IPA, which uses a whole bunch of Chinook. Little bit about our approach to IPAs. I tend to like beers, IPAs that have little to no crystal malt sweetness. I feel that often kind of goes against the hoppy character. It leads kind of a black tea, astringency to those beers. So most of our IPAs are pretty straight base malt, a couple little specialties to round that out. And then we focus a lot on late hopping around here. Our double IPA is probably about 95% of the hops go in the last 5 minutes. Our standard That IPA, there's actually no hops in the boil at all. It's 100% Whirlpool hops in that one, which is kind of an idea I borrowed from Jeff O'Neill, who used to be the brewer at both Ithaca Brewing and Peekskill Brewing and is now opening his own place. And what we really want to do is kind of minimize bitterness. We want some bitterness there to balance out the little bit of sweetness that's going to be left in the beer. But we really want to just drive that flavor and aroma character.
So like, what are you clocking IBUs on your IPA, which I know brewers often kind of get a little annoyed. It's not about IBUs, but like, what would your IBUs be at?
So it's when you're adding all late hops, or mostly late hops, it's a really inefficient way to utilize those hops because you're not getting much bitterness. It's been a while since I had that IPA tested. It's calculating out at 45 to 50 IBUs, and that's with a 30-minute Whirlpool stand. Okay. But what you're doing, where we do 50-gallon, we do basically 190-liter batches. If we were getting all that bitterness at the beginning of the 60-minute boil, we might add 150 grams of hops. But because we're driving all that at the end, which is very inefficient in terms of extracting bitterness, we might add 1.5 kilograms of hops. But you retain all those flavors and aromas that would normally be boiled off. It's kind of an extension of just kind of hop bursting. And I know there's a handful of places in New York that are doing it. I know there's a handful of places in Ontario that are doing it. And you can really tell, you just get so much more flavor and aroma out of beers. Hop flavor and aroma out of beers that are done in that manner.
Do you have hops that you favor? Go-tos?
Hops are, so even at 4 years, we still often struggle to source hops. I'm usually good in terms of having everything contracted, but sometimes, demand for a certain beer is greater than my prediction, and I struggle to get hops. So at this point, a lot of our beers are based around Simcoe, Mosaic, and Amarillo, because that's what I have a lot of contracted. We do use a ton of Simcoe here, and that, again, is just kind of a result of what we were able to get. When we first opened up, good story about the beer industry being awesome. When we first opened up, our Pale Ale Frank was supposed to be Centennial, Columbus, and Citra. And then when I talked to all the hop vendors about getting Citra, they all kind of laughed at me. As they do. So we subbed in a different hop, and it's a nice beer. And then in probably the summer of 2012, I don't remember, Sam Adams sent an email blast out to everyone in the Brewers Association and said, hey, we have all these extra hops. We'll sell them to you at our cost if you want them. So it was kind of a lottery because there was greater demand than there was supply on Sam Adams' end. But we ended up with, 200 pounds or so of Simcoes from them, and we kind of built a lot of beers based on having that big supply of Simcoe. So Simcoe still features really prominently in our current that IPA. It featured really prominently in the IPA that we had before that. And moving forward, I'd like to kind of diversify our hops. There's always new, fun, exciting hops. There's all the New Zealand stuff going on. There's always new stuff coming out of the Pacific Northwest. There's a slowly growing hop scene here in Western New York, and I know up in Southern Ontario. There's a bunch of stuff going on. We're basically working with what we can get. Always happy to find and try new stuff. It's always exciting at the Craft Brewers Conference to see what the growers are coming up with. But we tend to like the kind of brighter, fruitier kind of hop character rather than dank and piney, I guess. We use primarily Canadian two-row and
finest in the land.
Finest in the land. And
you get it from Canadian malting?
German Pilsner malt. It is a Canadian malting company. We actually get it through North Country Malt, which is located in Champlain, New York, right up kind of towards Montreal. But it's already in the States at that point. And then we have a whole mass of different specialty malts. Like I said, most of our IPAs are Canada two-row base. For our double IPA, we do use a little bit of Pilsner malt just to kind of smooth that out a little bit, get a little less big malt character in that double IPA, because again, we want the hops to shine, not so much the malt.
So the Pilsner malt imparts less malty characteristics?
It's a little lighter in terms of flavor. Yeah.
And is that a European Pilsner malt?
Yes, it's German Pilsner malt.
Do you have any considerations with water chemistry for your IPA? What are you looking at?
We add some gypsum just to kind of get a little more character, but you know, the water coming out of Lake Erie here is really, really nice. We just run it through a sediment filter to get out anything that might be floating around in Buffalo's 100-and-some-year-old pipes, and then a carbon filter. So we're lucky. We don't really need to do very much with the water here.
Cool. And you ferment it just with sort of Cali ale, like American ale yeast?
Yeah, we use US-05, which actually which is a dry yeast. Which is the Sierra Nevada, the Chico 1056, whatever strain. We do that for pretty much all of our non-Belgian beers. It's cheap, it's quick, it flocks out really well, and we're happy with the results. I'd like to play around with some, messing around with different yeasts. If you look at kind of the Vermont, New England style of IPA, where they're a lot cloudier, but they have that super, like literally almost like drinking orange juice or mango juice or something like that. You're not going to get that character with US-05, but I haven't started to mess around with that yet. But there's a lot of cool new yeast labs that have opened up. There's Omega in Chicago. There's RVA somewhere. Maybe the VA stands for Virginia. I don't know. There's Escarpment in Ontario, yeah, and I'm hoping to do something with them in the near-ish future. We're going to figure that out. But yeah, there's all kinds of new labs. There's new, exciting, fun stuff. There's a lot of people harvesting wild Brett's, wild yeasts, different lacto, that kind of stuff. So playing around with that kind of stuff is certainly where we're moving. I'm more concerned with clarity now than I was when we first opened, but I'm still not insanely concerned with clarity. I think that the people we're selling beer to, for the most part, recognize that beer doesn't need to be incredibly clear. It can be very pretty when it's incredibly clear, but it doesn't have to be. I think that we're seeing kind of the industry shift towards that. I know Sam Adams has a new double IPA out, which they're advertising as being hazy. But that's not to say that we want to send out, or that we do send out, really muddy, yeasty beer. That's bad news when something is sludgy. You don't want that. Right, but some haze, some is fine. I'm not super concerned about that.
So I know a centrifuge is a big piece of equipment. That's,
right.
That's big brewery talk, but is that the sort of thing you'd be looking at down the road?
Possibly. I guess what I would love to see, centrifuge would be great because you're yielding all the beer. You're not losing anything to filtering. But I'm concerned, and this might be a stupid concern, I don't really know, about changes in quality. So part of what makes our beer quite as punch-in-the-face hoppy as it is that it's not filtered, that there are, minuscule itsy-bitsy bits of hops hanging out in there. You can't see them, but they're hanging out in there. And you do see differences sometimes when a beer is filtered and when it's not filtered. There's a fine line to walk between being like, we need to be profitable and make sure we squeeze every last drop of beer out of this batch that we can, and making the absolute best beer that you can. And I tend to lean towards making the absolute best beer and maybe making a little less money because I want the beer to be the best that it possibly can be.
Okay, 2 non-community beer work IPA questions.
Yeah.
What was the first IPA you had that kind of made you go, holy moly?
Good question.
There's something here.
Yeah, so 1999, I don't know, I started getting into better beer. Kind of before that, I'd been drinking a lot of stuff from Saranac, which is, pretty good, but nothing mind-blowing, whatever. But then I started going to Premier with my buddy, and when we had a bunch of money, we would get Dogfish Head 90 Minute. Used to be a pretty different beer, and they used to sell it in 750s, and it was just mind-blowingly good. But it was also 10 or 11 bucks for a 750, which was kind of, at that point, bonkers. So that was definitely something I really thought a lot about. And then at the same time, when I didn't have 10 bucks to spend on a single beer, Victory Hop Devil at that time was a really wonderful beer that was available, and it was probably $8 a 6-pack or something like that. So we would drink a lot of that. I'm sure we would drink a lot of 60 Minute. Trying to think what other really hoppy beers there were around at that time. Those are the ones that kind of stand out.
Okay, and then obviously you probably take a lot of your own beer home to drink.
Right.
But what are some ones that you look out for? What are you picking up these days in terms of IPA?
Oh, man.
Your regulars, if you will.
So a key to IPA is that it's fresh. And I'm very spoiled working at a brewery that I can always drink IPA that was kegged within 3 or 4 days. When I'm out at a store buying IPA, I try to kind of find the most recently released thing because unfortunately there's a lot of past its prime IPA sitting on the shelves of every store. Whereas if a new brewery comes out or a new seasonal IPA comes out, I can guarantee that that's really fresh. Unfortunately, at this point, far too few packaging breweries are dating their cans and bottles. So I'm always happy to grab an AleSmith IPA if it's fresh, or something from Alpine. Alpine is nice.
Good Lord.
The Avery IPA is pretty decent, but in general, whatever's new and fresh. So just, the same as if you walked into a butcher and you'd say, what's good today? I'll walk in and talk to whoever's behind the counter who's hopefully knowledgeable and say, all right, cool, what are the new IPAs you just got in? And sometimes it's something that's been around for a long time. Sometimes it's a seasonal. I know Trogue's Nugget Nectar's coming out real soon, so that'll be fun. But sometimes it's a new brewery. I just picked up, it's a brewery kind of halfway between Buffalo and Pittsburgh called Voodoo that just came into the area. So we just got a bunch of their IPA in. So that's new and fresh.
Well, I'd like to thank Rudy down at Community Beer Works for that really awesome description of how they're making their very new school style American IPAs. Big, fruity, juicy IPAs. Man, those are good. I obviously sampled most of them while I was in there. I think you should do the same. If you're in the Buffalo area, you got to go check them out. Just an amazing brewery doing some really cool stuff. If you want to know more about IPAs, stop into any brewery, Community Beer Works, or whichever one's nearest to you. Ask them. They're way more than willing to take you through the process, give you samples. Brewers love getting to talk about what they do, and they love people knowing about what their products are. So don't hesitate. Don't be shy. Head into your local brewery and ask. Another good way to learn more about beer is following along here. It's like last videos. So if you haven't already, subscribe down there. And thanks for watching.